this, and I'm sure I'm going to need help.
You got it.
So, so we will start with introductions. I guess I will call on people just from the top left of my screen. Roberto.
Thank you, Dave. This is Roberto Cotto. I work for ODOT as the Active Transportation Program Analyst. In my role, I assist both SRAC and OBPAC. And I guess we can pass it on to Leanne.
Yeah, I'll do a quick intro. Dave, how we usually do it is like introduce the OBPAC members. And we generally ask folks that aren't OBPAC members or like specific staffing of OBPAC to turn their cameras off so that we can have a little bit of a distinction. Thank you. And then we have OBPAC members kind of do a roll call just to like make sure we have enough people in the room. And then if there's time, let OBOT staff introduce themselves, and then we'll hop into the rest of the meeting. So I'll do a quick intro for me, but then if you want to call on the OBPAC members to introduce themselves, that'd be great. I'm Leanne Ferguson. I'm the Active Transportation Senior Policy Analyst at ODOT. And I'm staffing ODOT right now, but this is actually the last meeting that I'm going to be staffing ODOT because we have a new ped bike program manager that we will introduce later on in the meeting. And I'll pass it back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Leanne. Beth?
I am Beth Young. I work for the City of Newport. I am the OBPAC member who represents local governments and planning.
Thank you. Emma?
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Newman. I'm from Springfield, Oregon, right next to Eugene. And it's really good to see everyone and hopefully connect with some of the newer members. Good to see new faces. I've been away for the last couple of meetings. Really glad to be back. And I am now in the role of non-voting member.
Thank you. And Nolan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nolan. I am serving as the OBPAC, under 20 or under 21 role.
I'm under 21.
Under 21. I'm a student at the University of Oregon. And right now I'm just hanging out in Portland waiting to move in. That's it.
Thanks, Nolan. Del?
Hi, I'm Del Scharfenberg. I'm trying to figure out why my video is so blurred, but it's just a crappy camera, I guess. Anyway, I'm Del Scharfenberg. I'm representing ORTAC, and I'm in Beaverton right now. I commute between my home in Milwaukee and my office in Beaverton every day by bike. Yeah, I'm glad to be here again.
Thanks, Del. Carrie?
Hi, everybody. This is Carrie Roberson. I am a community health specialist for Multnomah County Health Department. And I'm on the REACH team, which is racial and ethnic approaches to community health. So we do all types of community outreach, encourage physical activity in the forms of biking and walking, and we do healthy nutrition programming. I live in Northeast Portland, where I was born and raised and have recently returned, and happy to meet you all or see you all. Have a good day.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay. So Leanne, do we want to have the ODOT? I think we got all the OBPAC members.
Great. If you're a guest on the meeting today, if you can introduce yourself in the chat, that would be super helpful. And let's move on to meeting goals. And if you want, Dave, I can do some of the highlights of the meeting goals today.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah. So our goals today are to meet our new program manager, Ian Davidson, to do some do some work planning and to start getting informed around the ODOT pedestrian and bicycle audit and how OBPAC can help help with that work. And the only vote that we'll be taking today will be about our meeting minutes from July. So that's the overview.
Thank you. Okay, and next on the agenda is meeting etiquette. Roberto.
Maybe we could pause for 1 second, and I think Mavis is back on the call. Maybe we'd do a quick introduction for Mavis, and then we will move on to meeting etiquette.
Looks like Mavis is connecting to audio.
Oh, never mind. Maybe we'll do meeting etiquette first and then come back to Mavis.
Well, thank you, everyone. I will share my screen here. To go over a couple of housekeeping. If you're joining us for the first time using Zoom meeting, this is just a reminder that at the very bottom of your window, you'll find different menus. As Leanne mentioned earlier, we ask for folks to stay muted and also to stop their video unless they're providing testimony or you're an OBPAC member. You're also able to change your name using this button. And if you plan on doing any type of testimony, we plan on just having a section where folks can provide public comment. Please let us know by raising your hand on the reaction button or putting your name and letting us know that you're interested in providing public comment. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded to abide to the Oregon Public Meeting Law. We ask for committee members and members of the public to just remain respectful when addressing any of the folks joining us today. Lastly, public comment. As I mentioned, folks can let us know via the chat room or by raising their hand that they're interested in providing public comment once we get to that section. Public comment usually is kept to 1 to 3 minutes. So that being said, I will pass it back over to our co-chair.
Thank you, Roberto. So next up, we have public comment. Do we have any hands raised? I don't see any.
I don't see anything in the chat either. I do. Oh, we've got one hand raised in the chat, and then there was a couple of, at least one email public comment. We just want to make sure that folks were, that OBPAC members were able to read that. But I'll pass it back to you, Dave, but we can go to the Street Trust if you want.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yes, Street Trust, please introduce yourself and make your comment.
Hi, Sarah Iannarone, she, her pronouns. I'm executive director of the Street Trust. I just wanted to flag for OBPAC that the public comment period is now open for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project connecting Northeast Portland with Vancouver, Washington. I know that's just a tiny corner of the state and y'all cover it a lot, a territory, but that's a massive project. And it's going to take an awful lot of resources to get that built. One of the things we know is that there will be significant public transportation investments along this connector because it comprises a good amount of how we are bringing money to our state to build it. That said, it is not a given that the connections between paths for walking and biking and transit will be seamless, nor that it will be a safe, seamless experience for people to access that bridge walking or biking from either side of the river. So I just wanted to flag that for your group. The Street Trust, in partnership with Oregon Walks, is hosting a series. We have a small active transportation working group that is coming together to make sure that we both solicit, refine, and submit public comments, especially for people walking, biking, and accessing transit across this connector. So I will drop my email in the chat, and then you can contact me if you want to either join one of our briefings or have me send you briefing materials or support you in any way in making sure that OBPAC submits public comment during this public comment period. I will flag the draft supplemental EIS is 2,500 pages long before the technical documents, which are about 10,500 pages long. Yeah, you heard me. We've got 60 days to comment on under 15,000 pages of technical writing. But if you read the 67-page executive summary, it can give you some good insight. And then again, the Street Trust and Oregon Walks in partnership with 40 Mile Loop, Bike Loud, and other groups are working to make sure that you have all the information you need. So thanks for considering that. I know you got a lot on your plate, but I just wanted to make sure you didn't miss that public comment period. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your comment, and I think we all definitely need to be aware that it is going to have quite an impact on the state budget. Okay, next up is approval of the meeting minutes from July 2024. I guess we just ask if there's if any OBPAC members have corrections or other comments on the minutes.
And if there's not any, you could also be open to a motion to approve.
I am open to a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
And I will second it.
The motion has been made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's just for a record, I see Dave is a yes, Nolan's a yes, Dell's a yes, Beth is a yes. Emma's our new non-voting member. But thank you for being here, Emma. And Carrie Roberson has her hand raised. Thank you, Carrie. And Mavis, do you approve the meeting minutes? We're still having connectivity issues with Mavis, so we'll just make sure that we get hers before we call it unanimous, but it looks like we're on our way. I think Dave, you can continue while Mavis works out getting herself joined.
Okay, thank you. So next up on our agenda, our division updates. It looks like Suzanne Carlson.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Don't have a lot by way of division updates. I think Andrea Durbin will join in a moment and might announce some new staff which are on here, spoiler alert. So we'll welcome them in just a moment. I know many of you have been involved with the Joint Committee on Transportation tours that are ongoing, continuing tomorrow and Friday, and I believe those are the last two. But as you know, legislature's been going around the state and asking for public input into what a transportation package will look like for next session. And OBPAC has submitted a letter with their comments as well. Today, they are having ledge days, for those who aren't in the loop, legislative days where they have some speakers come talk in front of the committees, and ODOT will be there doing a little bit of short update around just our work preparing for some work groups that are about to kick off, and then for next legislative session. I have been not yet involved, but hear that there's a public and active transportation work group. I hope to hear a little bit more this afternoon. It's going to start in October and run for 3 months up until October, November, December this year in advance of session, where I expect we, ODOT, you, Advisory Committee, and the public will learn more about what the legislators are going to be looking for around public and active transportation in that session. So I'll probably have a presence there, let's just say. I think ODOT will be asked to bring forward information and talk about what we've put in our request. As a reminder, we've asked for $115 million per year in bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and we've asked for 35 million. Somehow the fives and the zeros, I tend to, okay, it's 35 million. In Safe Route School increase per year to be able to meet the need that we've seen with applications for the Safe Route School program. I think that's about all I know. Again, these are really legislative functions, and I'm just kind of reporting what we know and how we get involved as ODOT And then you as advisory committee members, of course, can assist when it comes down to things actually getting on the table, right? And ODOT needing to take action and looking for advice from the advisory committee. I think we'll just keep you informed and go forward from there. Any questions, comments, anything I might have overlooked in that update?
I don't see any. Thank you.
Great. And thanks for those of you who have or have had friends come out to share your input into those sessions as they've gone across the state. And the last two, there's Happy Valley tomorrow, and then they're in Hillsborough on Friday. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass to Andrea to make her announcements.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. So my announcement is really to introduce our new bike ped program manager, Ian Davidson. We're very excited to welcome him to our team. He started about 3 weeks ago. We'll have a chance to for all of you to meet him and get to know him. Of course, working together. Ian comes to us from the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, where he managed a program there, including a grant distribution program. He also is a founder of working on an organization, working on bicycle pedestrian issues in Salem. He has served on the board of Salem Chariots on their transit system, and has been very involved in lots of different areas that intersect with transportation issues over the years. So with that, I'm just going to maybe take a moment and let Ian come on camera, and he can say hello to you all and share anything about himself that you'd like to share.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Andrea, for the introduction. I'm thrilled to be here. As Andrea said, I'm Ian Davidson. My pronouns are he, him. Very excited to be in this role as the new bicycle and pedestrian program manager. A little bit more about me. My wife and I, we live in Salem with 2 daughters. We've lived here since 2015 when we moved down here to take a job with the Oregon legislature. As Andrea mentioned, I'm coming to you all from the Criminal Justice Commission, and non-professionally, as Andrea mentioned, I've worked in transportation policy for several years now, both in transit, bike advocacy, and then maybe of note to you all, I have served on the Mid-Willamette Valley Area Commission on Transportation. So I too have served on a committee that advises the Oregon Transportation Commission. So I know a little bit about that on that side of things. And then lastly, I'll just add that I'm currently the chairman of the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. And I only bring that up to say, because they're the home of our metropolitan planning organization, as well as our Safe Routes to School program. So really excited to be here, really excited to work with you all. And here in the coming days or coming weeks, I'll be sending emails to each of you to schedule some time to get to know you a little bit better, to hear more about your priorities and your goals for OBPAC, because to the extent that I can, I'd love to help you all accomplish those. So thank you.
Thank you,
Ian. Welcome. We're very happy to have you on board.
Yes. Okay, Leanne, I believe you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. I just realized, Dave, that we've always been fairly informal at OBPAC, and I didn't ask you beforehand, like, do you want to be Chair Thompson or Thompson, or how would you like? So I feel like I've been calling you Dave this whole time. Let me know if that's not correct. So thank you, Dave / Chair Thompson.
We didn't get asked that, Leanne. We didn't have titles, but I'm happy to call you Chair Thompson and Co-Chair Thompson and Co-Chair.
Just don't call
I'm forgetting your last name.
Yeah, just don't call me Mr. Then I feel real.
All right, sir.
Well, so I get to do a little bit more about the staff roles, which is now that we have Ian on board as our pedestrian and bicycle program manager, he's taking over the position that Jessica Horning last held. And so I've been working with OBPAC on and off for the past year and really enjoyed it. And right after this meeting, Ian will be your main contact for everything Oregon Bike and Ped Advisory Committee related. So And I just wanted to say thank you all. It's been my pleasure to work with you. And I will still be here. I will be coming to all of your meetings. I will be supporting Ian in his staffing of OBPAC and supporting you all. But he'll be your main contact right as soon as this meeting's over. So that's how we're dividing up working with you all, that I am here as support and he is here as your main contact after this meeting moving forward. I also wanted to do a quick note that in the next week or so, we will be sending out a survey to all of our advisory committee members in the Public Transportation Division, getting some of your input on meeting cadence for 2025. So just wanted to put that bug in your ear that you'll be getting that in an email in the next week or so. And I think that's all the announcements that I have. So passing it back over to you, Dave.
Thank you. And, Dave is great. Hopefully it won't devolve to something worse as time goes on. Next up is OBPAC business. And the first item is get to know Ian.
That's the one that I get to do as well. So,
okay.
What I wanted to do is give Ian the floor for a couple more minutes just to tell you guys a little bit more about himself. And then what we will do is we'll do a round table. So OBPAC members and Ian can all get to know each other. And so you can choose from one of two questions when we do our round table. One is what's in a name, which is a question I got from Carrie Roberson when she and I got together recently. You can tell us a little bit about your name, where it came from. Or you can tell us a little bit about a person that's really inspired you in your life. So we'll do a roundtable where everybody gets to share that information. You can pick one of those two questions to answer. So I'll pass it off to Ian just to give us a couple more minutes worth of background from him, and then we'll do that roundtable so everyone can share a little bit. Take it away, Ian.
All right. I don't know what exactly else I should add. I guess I can add how about a colorful anecdote related to active transportation. So early in my career, I was interning with the city of Lake Oswego, and I was coming from Corvallis where I did my graduate work. So I needed to move closer to my new internship. And so kind of sight unseen, I rented an apartment in Milwaukee, and then it wasn't until later that I realized that the bridge that I saw on a map wasn't actually a pedestrian or even a vehicular bridge. It was a railroad bridge. And so it would take me quite a bit longer to get to my place of employment. So I thought that was silly after doing it for a few days. And so I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, bought a kayak, and then for the rest of the summer, kayaked to work. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, Leanne, but it killed some time, and so I'm happy to share that. And then in terms of where my name comes from, I'm not exactly sure where. I know it means John, which is incredibly uncreative, but I think with the name Davidson, I think there's some Scottish roots there, so they went with Ian. And that's me.
Great, thanks, Ian. Let's do a roundtable, and then if we have a little bit of extra time, we can do a Q&A where you guys can ask Ian a couple more. If you have any more questions about his background, you guys can ask him a little bit more. But we'll do our roundtable first. Beth, will you go next? Either what's in a name or a person who's inspired you.
Okay. Let's go with last name. Which is a complete misnomer. I'm a little bit English, but not much. It's my ex-husband's name. My maiden name is O'Donnell, and as you can tell, I don't look very Irish. It's because I'm half Italian and the rest is a mixture, Irish and German and English and a part of Yugoslavia. Czechoslovakia. I don't remember. So I've been to both of them, though. I have been to Calabria, or the part of Italy that I'm from, and also did a DNA test and went to the exact County Donegal, where in Ireland too. So that was fun to go to those places. That's my story.
Thanks, Beth. Del, can you go next?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to follow up on the story about the bridge and the kayak. I have a canoe and paddle across that same piece of river very often. And that particular railroad bridge, I don't know if you guys saw the news, but it was the target of arson recently, and the trestle is burned to a crisp, and the railroad cannot use it anymore. And somehow they found an alternate route. I've been lobbying for 20 years to make that bridge into a bike pedestrian crossing, and there was actually a proposal from PSU group probably a couple of decades ago about cantilevering a ped pathway on that bridge, and of course everybody knows working with the railroads never works. So anyway, to follow up on the unfortunate fire incident, I'm wondering if there's any way to convince the railroad to abandon that bridge and let it be rebuilt as a pedestrian bicycle bridge. That would be awesome. As far as my name, my full name is Delbert, and my mother named me after one of her brothers, and I've never been very enamored with the name. And the last name is Swiss German, and I'm not really much into ancestry, but my grandfather was pretty famous in the church and was a general conference member and world traveler, and yeah.
Thanks,
And
Del.
and I have an uncle with the same last name, John Scharfenberg, that you can Google him and see him on. He's 100 years old now, and he's still working very actively as a lecturer on nutrition, specifically on longevity. And being 100 years old gives him a lot of credence. So.
Thanks for sharing, Del. We're gonna do a test really quickly to see if Mavis can talk on this meeting. Mavis, can you try unmuting and answering the question, which is, you can tell us a little bit more about your name or about a person who's inspired you? Mavis is also texting me on the side, so we'll see if anything comes up in that front too. Mavis, are you able to unmute? All right, we'll try again in a little bit.
Wait,
let's
wait,
oh,
wait,
there
I
you
think I
are!
got
Yay! You did it!
Okay. Yes, I'm here. My name is Mavis, and it's a very southern, like Ireland, that kind of area. I guess in the south there's a lot of it. But there was there's a skier at Hoodoo when my parents were young, and I'm named after her. There you go.
Thanks, Mavis. Let's pop up to Nolan.
Hello. I didn't know, I don't know why my parents named me Nolan, but I never knew what the meaning of it was, but I thought it was a good time to look it up. And it's from 12th century Ireland, and it is like the passed down, chopped up version of the surname O'Neilan, which was a last name of a family that was associated with nobles and famous people because it was like what they would name people that was close to the king or the kings of Ireland. And so it got chopped up when the English, took over and colonized them, and then it got chopped up again when people moved to North America during the famine. So I'm noble and famous. And that's all. Was there another question? I got really distracted by reading the website.
No, the name was good. Good job, Nolan. I could have told you you're noble and famous. Good job, Nolan.
Oh, thanks.
Carrie Roberson, can you go next, please?
Yes. I'm gonna go with a walking anecdote. I mean, active transportation anecdote. I was walking, and it was just a gorgeous day. So I was walking, and I had gone downtown, and then I decided I'm gonna walk across the Broadway Bridge to get home, and right mid-span, like a big old wave of vertigo hit me, and I didn't know if I was gonna get nauseous, pass out, what was gonna happen, but I was like really afraid all of a sudden. And then I was like, okay, but I'm in the middle. So no matter which way I go, I still have to traverse the same distance. So it didn't make sense to go back. So I just had to like not look at the water and just keep walking. And of course, I made it okay. I'd say someone that inspired would be my grandma. She left her small farming community in Illinois to marry a singing cowboy, went to LA with him in like the 30s, and then ended up moving to Oregon. The only person she knew up here was her sister. And she just made it happen and had her farm, and always had always owned a home, always had her farm, her animals. And so then she was, very self-sufficient. And so those were things and active. Grandma could walk you into the ground at even like 70 something years old. She would leave the grandkids in the dust. So yeah, she was inspiration.
Thanks, Carrie. Emma, would you go next, please?
Like Carrie, I'm going to take that question of inspiration. I've been thinking a lot lately about what my mom has contributed to me. And I think back to kind of overarching lessons of figure things out and do good in the world. And some of the ways that she demonstrated that was by getting us out working on political campaigns before I was old enough to be able to vote, standing on street corners in downtown Portland with signs, you name it, like library ballot measures, all sorts of stuff, phone calling, some interesting experiences as a younger kid on the phones. But I just appreciate how she demonstrated getting involved, even when it was very uncomfortable. She's an introvert who went, and I remember one time we went to a federal building in downtown Portland. She provided testimony when she was working on small scale solar, so you can have community owned solar in the state of Oregon, trying to make some legislative changes to make that possible. And she stood up and spoke about climate change and the impact to our world if we didn't take action as a state soon. And this was 15, 20 years ago. And I just remember that even though she was literally shaking and trembling, she was taking action on my behalf, other younger folks, the community as a whole. Even though it's super uncomfortable, she was willing to stand up and speak her mind. That then led to somewhere in the mix there, she got her US citizenship because of concerns around speaking up and changing the system within a country that's not always nice to those who do so, but that's how change happens. And so I just think about all the ways she contributed, whether it was setting up community gardens, running the squash league at our local athletic club, the solar work that she did. It was always seeing that the world has so many challenges and so much suffering, but there's something we can do about it. And so I just really appreciate that she encouraged me to do things, whatever it is, figure out something. You see there's something that's not fair, not just, get involved and do something about it.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for sharing about your mom. Dave, you want to wrap us up?
Thank you. So now I feel guilty because I'm not going to talk about my mom because she was such an inspiration. But I wanted to point out my high school science teacher. I went to high school in the middle of Southern Nevada desert. There were 30 kids in my high school graduating class, so it was a pretty small school. And we just had the luck of having just an awesome science teacher at this little school who basically convinced me to quit hanging out with the wrong set of kids and start trying to learn things. And, once you learn how to learn, things get a lot better. So, so I think about him every once in a while with great respect. So that's mine.
Thanks, Dave. I think that wraps up all of our OBPAC members, plus introducing Ian. Did anyone have any additional questions for Ian before we move? We're ahead of schedule in the agenda, so just making a little space.
I have one.
Yeah, Emma.
What's your favorite bicycle that you've ever ridden on or owned and enjoyed riding on regularly?
Sure, that's my rad wagon, which I affectionately call my dad wagon. It's a long tail cargo e-bike where I can fit my 2 daughters on the back, and so I take them around town. And when weather permits and the girls are interested, I take them to school as well. School is about 5 miles away from home, so it's a bit of a journey. But yeah, that's my favorite bike. Although I did have a bike in graduate school that I called the Rocinante. As attempting to, yeah, I have a lot of affection for that bike that is no longer with me, but yeah.
Beth.
Ian, I'm wondering about tell me about Salem Bike Vision.
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit, so I want to be careful here. So that is a nonprofit project that advocates for protected bike lanes within Oregon's capital city. So, yeah.
So what kind of things do you do to get that?
Yeah, that is probably a conversation that I would love to have with more time, if that's all right. Maybe on our one-on-one meet and greet, if that works.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's working with elected leaders and key decision makers mostly.
I see.
Yeah, Ian's doing a great job of like a fine line of like right now he's the ped bike program manager at ODOT hat on, and he's got another hat on where he gets to do all kinds of cool things, but trying not to mix the two is a complicated line. So good job, Ian. And any other questions?
Maybe me still, since I'm wondering what you did with the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. Or you are on the board? They have a
Yes,
board?
I'm still on the board and I'm currently the chairman. So it's a council of government. So there's 30 plus local and 1 tribal government. We are a voluntary collection of governments that have come together to advocate for regional priorities and to have some efficiency. So we have a lot of transportation planners, for example, that can help out when cities. So actually, you probably know, it's like Oregon Cascade West. So so I serve on the board there and currently chairman.
I didn't know the Council of Governments had a board.
Oh yeah.
And is this a voluntary position?
Yeah, it's through my work on the Chariots board. So Chariots is a member government of the Council of Governments.
I see.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. Well, thanks, Ian, and thanks for the follow-up questions, everybody. We'll have lots more time to get to know Ian. I have told him we are now in the era of Ian in our PedBike program manager role, and that Jessica had the era of Jessica, which was full of Oreos and all sorts of other things. And I was like, Ian, you get to figure out what your era is. And so we're gonna keep him we're gonna envelop him into the work, and we're excited to have you, Ian. And I'm really glad that you're getting to know this committee. This is a great group of people. I think we can keep chugging forward on the agenda. Dave, I also just got a notice from Andre that he has been out with COVID and is not quite recovered enough to be at our meeting today yet, so he won't be here. So we did have a work plan session, which I think we can kind of wing a little bit and more of a brainstorming for our 2025 calendar, if you're up for that. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that Andre won't be here for that piece, but I'm here to help support if we want to wing it a little bit and spend a little time talking about it without him.
Okay, thanks, Leanne. Before we move on, I do want to say that in between those two eras, there was the era of Leanne, and you have just been awesome, given that you added this to all your other work, and I think we've all just felt really, really well supported. Thank you so much.
I appreciate the kind words.
So yeah, yes, I'm not really prepared in any way to to drive this strategic calendar agenda item, but if you can help, we'll see what we can.
Also want to note that Emma's got her hands up, Dave. I'm not sure if what you can
sorry.
see on your screen. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I'm bad at looking for hands. Go ahead, Emma.
No problem. It kind of fades into the trim up there. At some point, I would love to do a brief update on the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee that I serve on behalf of OBPAC. Sarah, who's the chair, is also here. I don't know if now is a good time under OBPAC business. It's not a specific item, or if it should be later on in the agenda.
I think we should go ahead and do it. I think the next piece is probably going to be a little shorter than we planned, so go ahead.
Okay, and I see that Sarah, I was going to kind of tag her in because she's the chair. She's taking a quick call right now, so maybe we can just tag it on at the end of OBPAC business after the strategic conversation. Thank you.
You may have to raise your hand again and remind me.
I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, so Leanna, in your last official thing here, can you help us with the work planning?
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about the letter to the Joint Transportation Committee beforehand, or do you feel like, I feel like maybe a quick update on that, and then we'll jump into work plan.
Yes, thank you. I skipped that. We vote at our last meeting, we voted on a letter for OBPAC to send to the Joint Committee on Transportation. Following that vote, we got some really good input from Andrea and Leanne, but I don't know if I should throw Leanne under the bus, but anyway, we got some really good input that we might do better if we rearrange things a little bit and led with the bike ped piece a little more heavily. And so under the committee's guidance that they were approving it and we could maybe make some tweaks, we kind of moved things around. We removed one paragraph just because by the time we got things the way it looked good, there wasn't room for it anymore. But I think we really kept the essence of what the committee approved, and that was submitted to the JCT. The letter was posted in the chat if anybody wants to take a look at what the final letter looked like. I was also had volunteered to present a public comment at the JCT meeting or the roadshow meeting in Bend on the letter. As it turned out, I was invited to participate in both the legislative bus tour and the I'm trying to remember what it was called now.
Like a round table?
Yeah, the roundtable, invitation roundtable that followed that. So within the confines of how they structured those, I tried to pass as much of our view on active transportation needs and priorities into that. Not sure how great a job I did, but hopefully okay. It was very interesting listening to the joint committee. Obviously, there's a lot of different viewpoints coming into that committee, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out the other side of the sausage making. So if anybody has any questions, I can try and answer them.
I was just wondering, how was the legislators on the committee, were they responsive or were they kind of, I don't know. I mean, I guess I was wondering if they were listening to people very well or if they were
Yeah, so that's a good question. On the bus tour, basically the local officials and kind of myself, who wasn't really a local official, but somehow ended up on the bus anyway, mostly tried to provide them with input on what the needs were, specifically in Central Oregon, as we rode around and looked at projects and issues. And what I tried to focus on there was the need, was we were building a lot of pieces, but really connectivity was the key to getting people who are hesitant out to use active transportation as a method, right? I mean, it's great if there's a separated bike trail right out your door, but if it ends and then you have to cross 4 busy streets before you get to the next piece, you may still not do it, right? So, and then in the roundtable, the legislators had a set of specific questions that they asked, and then we went around and each person at the table gave their thoughts on that particular question. So I think certainly at the roundtable, the legislators seemed to be very engaged in listening to what people were saying, and each in their own. In some cases, they kind of provided some. They were mostly listening, but they provided some hints as to what they were thinking, I guess, in the process. And clearly, that's all over the map. So there was quite a lot of discussion on the revenue side of things at the roundtable. And there seemed to be quite a few people there who thought that if we could just tax electric cars and bicycles, we could probably get the money we needed. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks for reminding me about that, Leanne.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks everybody. It was a team effort to get that letter out. Nolan, thank you. Dave, thank you. Andre, thank you in absentia, and good job. Thank you, Dave, for heading out to the meeting. Good job, everybody. All right, moving on to
I'll just comment here. Who was the staff member who helped you or who commented and suggested you switch things around?
That was Andrea.
Oh, okay, nice. Well, thank you. Okay.
We'll hop on down to a sort of an impromptu work planning session. So my take on this would be to help give is to do some brainstorming to give Andre an idea of what you guys are thinking about for creating a strategic calendar for 2025. So how I would phrase the question to you all is there any particular topic or program or piece of ODOT that you all want to make sure that you talk about or learn about in 2025? Then Ian and I can take that list, including whatever Andre wants to add, and then put in any sort of key pieces that we know is going to happen in 2025 and help fill out the calendar. An example of something that might be is that I know that in March, the Oregon Community Paths program will need to bring you all the project list so that you guys can help make a recommendation to approve which projects to be funded through the Oregon Community Paths program. So I know that's going to happen in March. So I don't have all of that mapped out today for this brainstorm, but I'm hoping to hear from you all. What are the topics you all want to discuss or programs that you all want to track? And then Ian and I can fill in some of the blanks. And then by the November meeting, we should have a pretty good strategic calendar for 2025. So opening the floor to thoughts or suggestions from the group. I'll try to be silent for a minute, but I have a couple of things that could potentially for folks to think about if we don't have any thoughts immediately. I can seed the ground. Go for it, Dave.
Well, and I'm not sure mine is realistic, right? But the 2025 legislature is going to basically set the path for transportation funding for the next biennium at least. And my probably naive view of the way this works is that there's going to be behind the scenes meetings between ODOT senior management, the Joint Committee on Transportation, and the OTC that are going to end up determining what gets voted on in the legislature. And I don't know how or if we are going to have any exposure at all to what's happening until it rolls out the other end. And that just bothers me. I mean, I know that's the way the sausage is made, but boy, I'd sure like to be able to interject a thought or two along the way if when they start talking about, well, let's just not do this and we're going to do this instead kind of things. But I don't know how we would do that. And
Well, I think at the very least, requesting a legislative update during each OBPAC meeting is something that we have definitely done in the past, and it brings the staff to the committee. So I think that's at the very least is something that we can write down and that we can help facilitate. Yeah, Emma.
Thank you. Kind of leaves this item with the earlier announcement you made, Leanne, about 2025 meeting frequency and kind of pacing. Having been on this committee for a number of years, I feel like we keep seeing the same cycle come around again and again, where we're like, oh, we want to engage in legislative session. Oh, we had a meeting maybe at the beginning and the end, and there went that one, and we'll try it again next time. So I'm curious what we might do differently this time to be more effective. I guess one is assessing, kind of to Dave's point, how much do we actually have power and the ability to influence the outcome? And where does that power and influence reside? That's one question in my mind. And then from the strategy to fulfill any change we might make in the process and the product, maybe we should consider an additional meeting or just a really short meeting that's more frequent during the legislative session, because it seems like we get the update at our meeting from the legislative update, we get new information, and then by the time we meet again to try to act on that information, the session's basically wrapping up. And so I'm just curious how we can approach this differently to be effective. What would being effective look like? How do we define that? And then what changes do we need to make to our processes to actually have an impact to the greatest extent that we can as a committee? And maybe Mavis is trying to come off mute and talk. I'm not sure.
Thanks, Emma. That really fleshed out what I was thinking in more concrete terms. I appreciate that.
I guess I would just be concerned, unless I don't see Mavis doing anything, but I am most concerned with like, just trying to help the employees of ODOT have more. I've heard a million stories about ODOT employees struggling. There's like an amazing project where there should be bike infrastructure and they just can't get the money for it, or they can't get the engineers to do it, or whatever. And I guess I just want to see having bike infrastructure be the norm. And so what I don't know, this is my area of expertise really, but whatever we can do to help support ODOT staff trying to get that regularized, and like that's a normal discussion on every project, is like, what do we do about public transportation and bike transportation here? And I don't know if that has to do with getting more money there, or if that has to do with educating ODOT staff, or what we can do. I don't know what really the issues are that are making it not happen at every single intersection or street design. So whatever you guys think as ODOT staff would be amazing.
Great. I'm sort of using this as brainstorming time to write down all of your thoughts and not have comments on everyone, just so that everyone is allowed to have thoughts. So let's keep going and brainstorming, and then Ian and I can take these ideas and figure out how to incorporate them into a schedule.
So from my perspective on the committee's role, right? I think we can provide input upwards through Ian and his management layers, right? The trick is going to be to know what's under discussion that we might be able to provide some input to help. And that's getting back to what I said at the beginning, is I'm not sure we know what those things are in time to to try and have whatever little influence we might be able to have. So if there's, again, I guess we can ask Ian to try and keep his ear to the ground as much as possible, and pass along what he can pass along, so we can provide input back. Other than that, I don't know enough about the process, so.
Great. Any other thoughts about 2025? Yeah, Emma.
Couple sub thoughts I'll just toss out there. If we're starting to get into content, I think one of the more effective ways to feed into the legislative process is to try to be in that concept formation phase. Potential concepts that I'd want to think about as a committee before kind of putting our oomph behind them could be bike ped bridges, because they are significant investments and there's not a good source to fund those key connections that are big gaps in the system right now across the state. And that's going to take something like a legislative package like this that only happens every so often, or a federal program. Maintenance funds for off-street paths. We have a lot of paths, but they're now getting into disrepair, and sort of continue the functionality of what we've already invested in the state would be something really important to look at. And then there's so much effort in the state around ADA ramps. I just was driving up to Portland yet again, and I saw ramps on an ODOT facility to nowhere. And yet I think about all of the sidewalk uplift and the sidewalk gaps. And I think a lot of that comes down to how sidewalks are and are not funded, are often developed in a piecemeal fashion, are often the responsibility of the property owner. Like, is there a way to look at the sidewalk problem and increase connected, accessible sidewalks throughout the state? Some of it could be funding, some of it could be just changes to rules and who's responsible and how they get built and how they get maintained. But bridges, maintenance of off-street paths, and sidewalk connectivity and usefulness are kind of, and funding are kind of three topics that we might want to consider on the concept platter. And then I just process-wise, I think because Ian's going to be meeting with each committee member, we can have this conversation now. This is great, but maybe you can note in your meetings if there are things that are coming out of those one-on-one conversations that would be good to plug into the work plan. that seems like a really smart follow-up piece. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Emma. Just real briefly, I guess the other thing I'd say, having listened to what people are saying here, is that I think the committees maybe had more influence in the past on how money gets spent when there is money. Things like prioritizing project lists and that kind of stuff, and less to say in, is there money? And so I think one of the things we're getting at here is trying to get more involved in the make sure there's money to prioritize, because if you don't have any, you can't prioritize it.
True. ODOT committees are generally engaged in like the STIP process, the statewide transportation. I can't ever remember, improvement program. I can't ever remember what the STIP means. Sorry, I'll have to double check that. And like when the BIL passed, when the bipartisan infrastructure legislation passed, and there was discretionary funds as part of that, like those are generally places when funding already exists that ODOT can really engage advisory committee in. So what you're getting at is the other side of that, and that's not typically something that is easy to facilitate. So my suggestion around the legislative session is to invite legislative staff to our November meeting and get some clarity on roles, and then you all can sort of discuss based on that how you want to spend time. And in regards to wanting to learn more and hear more about like ped bike bridges, maintenance funds, and ADA ramps, we can definitely bring program managers to the committee to talk through like what's currently happening. I think that could help educate the committee on when there are opportunities to engage and write letters and things like that. It'll allow you to be more specific in those letters. Also, when we bring program managers, there usually is an opportunity to provide some feedback on how that particular program is running. So those are all ways that we can incorporate what we're hearing right now into a work plan, as well as staff are working on implementing actions from an internal ped bike audit that was completed that we'll do a presentation on right after this. So the audit might be something that you want to sort of keep an eye on, and we can report out on the actions having to do with that audit. So those are all the thoughts that I have after hearing some of these ideas. We do actually have another 10 minutes before the break. We could kind of wrap this up and start and then take a break around now, and then come back in and have a little bit more time for that audit presentation / discussion. And if you have any additional thoughts after that for your 2025 work plan, we can sort of move on, but come back as you learn, as folks learn more. Dave, what do you think about where you want to take the meeting?
Recording in progress.
I think your suggestion of going to break and then coming back and let people kind of digest this, and then come back to it towards the end and see if there's more thoughts. I did want to mention one other thing that I had written down yesterday, which is I think that I know the committee in the past has gone around and talked to all of the COACT active transportation members, not COACT, the Advisory Committee on Transportation groups. And I was wondering if we could do the same with the ODOT active transportation liaisons. It would be really interesting to get them together in a roundtable and say, what are your guys' challenges? Because I've worked, with a couple, and we got spend some time in Corvallis. And I just think it would be interesting for the committee here how we might try and help them. I don't know if that's something we can do, but might be something to think about putting on our agenda at some point. Okay.
Looks like we've got 2 hands up, Emma and Beth.
Yeah,
Jurisdictional update, so probably Beth if it's on this topic, and then back to me.
Oh,
please.
right. Thanks for the reminder, Emma.
okay, I'll make mine quick. Let me lower my hand. Is just getting together everything that that's been said. I would emphasize educating us this coming year on various aspects of ODOT, and which is, I'm just reiterating here, but kind of seconding it, because we have a lot to learn. Most of us have not been here very long. Emma's our guru, and Mavis, but the rest of us have a lot to learn about just processes. And so we I'm getting the feeling we maybe don't know what we can do. And so we want to know what we can do. So if we could get people, Ian, if you could get people to talk to us about that, and piggybacking off of what Dave said, that I've talked to Jenna Berman, our Region 2 Active Transportation Liaison, and she says maintenance funding is the big deal. Don't need any new program. Well, I'm putting words in her mouth there, but it's maintenance that's the problem. And especially, I'll speak as a local, and out on the coast, things get, just like up in Deschutes County and all, things get damaged quickly. And with salt water and all kinds of corrosion happens really fast on not only signs but on pavement. Markings get off. So anyway, just wanted to emphasize those 2 things, and I'll let Emma speak. Oh, and I wanted to say, Dave, you said Aunt Andre, right? Before you were talking about Andre helped out, and I thought it was a woman named Andrea, right?
I meant to
Never
say
mind.
Andrea,
It doesn't.
It was Andrea Durbin who was the person.
Oh, it was Andrea. Okay, good. Okay, then I was
Yeah.
right. Okay.
No,
Thank
Andre, helped reading the letter and that kind of thing, but no, it was
Okay. Okay, that was just a little correction I had, but that wasn't a correction. Okay, go ahead, Emma.
Go ahead, Emma.
Or Dave.
Okay,
Emma.
thank you. So Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee is a committee that was established by the state legislature in 2023. And then the committee was formed at the end of 2023. I have been serving as OBPAC's representative on the committee since the first meeting in November of last year. Early on, we elected Sarah Iannarone as the chair, and thankfully she is here. So I'm going to hand it off to her for a more thorough update in a moment. Just kind of bringing all of you up to speed. While I haven't been at OBPAC meetings the last little bit, I have been going to the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee meetings. We met twice in quick succession at the end of July to review applications that were submitted, one from the city of Hood River and one from the city of Tigard. Both submitted fantastic projects that were in alignment with the purpose of the committee, which is to select and recommend to the Joint Transportation Advisory Committee that we fund the cost needed to transfer and improve streets to take it from an ODOT facility to a local jurisdiction. So in this case, it would be ODOT to City of Hood River and ODOT to City of Tigard. I'm going to pass it off to Sarah to give a more thorough update and kind of give you more about where we're headed next and what's upcoming for the committee. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Well, hi, and thanks. How lucky that we're here. I have to run over to the legislative hearing at 2:30, but it's nice to see all of you here, and thanks for sending an OBPAC rep to that meeting. I can tell you, into that process, I can tell you this, What we need to do is make sure that we've got objective criteria in place for these complete streets funding. As you know, we fight iteratively, session after session, omnibus package after omnibus package, to make sure that our complete streets are fully funded, that we have robust intercity transit, that our on-street and off-street networks are completed. And so what this is just one piece in that whole funding puzzle of how we are going to have a statewide investment strategy for safe, complete system, for especially for people who walk, bike, roll, and use public transportation. But there's some opportunities here as well. So as Emma referenced, we did set up the criteria because this was the inaugural session for us to have the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee in place, which mirror largely the Great Streets funding opportunities, which ODOT set up initially, again, with a lot of community input from that first 50 million in discretionary funding from IIJA that we fought and won to go to the Great Streets program. So the criteria of safety, climate, equity, and economic opportunity for these local jurisdictions mirror largely the criteria that jurisdictions need to apply for Great Streets funding. Why? So that we can start to streamline some of these processes and create a statewide investment fund for safe, complete streets. As Emma said, we are going to forward 2 corridors to the state legislature. Our letter is in there for the September Ledge Days to the Joint Transportation Committee, which is meeting at 2:30 today, that we fund a Main Street in Hood River and that we also fund High Hall Boulevard in Tigard. There weren't a lot of applications that came in this legislative session in preparation for this legislative session. I think in part jurisdictions, especially the smaller jurisdictions with smaller staff, did not have a lot of capacity to complete what was a relatively thorough process with a pre-application and a final application, where they worked through quite a significant amount of community engagement, planning, and budgeting just to qualify for being forwarded to the legislature this session. What we anticipate is if we fully fund these jurisdictional transfers this session, that every 2 years, we will be able to forward more roadways to the legislature for jurisdictional transfer and funding. We also know that there are jurisdictions that can't afford or don't have the capacity to take on corridors that will be future jurisdictional transfers. I think a good example is Inner Powell Boulevard in Portland, where the city of Portland is already managing 2 major projects, including the 82nd Avenue jurisdictional transfer. And so as a community, an active transportation advocacy community, I will say, we also need to come up with funding for those roadways as well. But the more systematic and the more parallel we can keep all of these funding streams, if you will, I think the better off we'll be in the long term. And I'm happy to discuss those with you further. And I did have the good fortune of sitting through your previous conversation where you talked about the legislative session. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat for you that I hope you will visit individually, if not in your committee roles, which I'm not sure what level of advocacy you're allowed to do as OBPAC members per se. But the Move Oregon Forward campaign is working really hard to do a lot of the homework around the questions that you raised in your conversation. What are the inflection points where your voices can make a real difference? What are the policy and advocacy points that we as an active transportation community can really push for in this 2025 legislative session? And then how can we uplift our collective voice and our collective power to make sure that some of those things happen? So I'm going to just drop that link tree in the chat, and you can see our campaign platform, all of the things that we've been thinking about, the ways that we're organizing in our communities. And even if you can't sign on as OBPAC members, maybe you can bring your individual organizations or your individual networks to bear in some of this work and at least carry that information back over to OBPAC. So thanks for the opportunity to give you an update. Thanks, Emma, for serving on the committee. It was great to have you there. She's so knowledgeable. You're lucky to have her. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'll just paint a little bit more for the committee. The intention behind the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee and setting up the consistent process is because historically, communities that have had good connections to their legislators have happened to be the squeaky wheel where things just aligned well. They were more likely to get funding for jurisdictional transfers, whereas by setting up this consistent process with clear criteria, we can actually come together as a state and say, okay, who wants to be considered and how can we forward the best couple of applications that are submitted to the state legislature and say, hey, we've gone through this process. Here's really the best choice for funding. Please fund it. And then consistently have that money going to complete streets that are serving all transportation modes and needs. So thanks, Sarah, so much. And I had dropped a link in the chat. Thanks, Leanne, for highlighting that back in 2022, kind of bringing some historical knowledge to the committee regarding legislative involvement. We had a meeting where we wanted more clarity on a few questions of how do we engage as a committee in relation to the legislative sessions. This is a starting point. It's less than 1 page. I recommend we all look back at it as we approach this next legislative session and think about how can we be most effective as a committee, both in our committee roles, and then if individuals want to engage as individuals, we can do that too. We just need to be clear about which hat we're wearing and what we're up to.
Thanks, Emma.
Beth's
Okay,
hand is up.
Beth.
Yeah, I thought we were specifically not allowed to lobby in any way. Is that what you're talking about, Emma?
Did you look at the PDF yet, Beth?
No.
Okay, maybe we'll spend 1 second and I'll share my screen really quickly because I feel like this might provide some clarity before we and then we'll take a break. Is that okay with you, Dave? Okay. So let's see if I can do this. Hang on, let me come on, open up. Sorry, I just had it open. I don't know why it's not showing up.
And I can share my screen if that's helpful.
That would be great. I don't know why
Sure.
it's not playing well. But there is a PDF in the chat, and let's see if it works for Ian.
Yeah.
Yay! Okay, here we go. Thank you. So, so to answer your question, Beth, as individuals, you guys are free to advocate for whatever you want, whenever you want. When you are wearing your OBPAC hat, that's when things get more specific. So like OBPAC can send letters supporting or advocating against legislative concept, or can OBPAC send letters supporting or advocating for legislative concepts. So OBPAC can actually advise the governor's office and the OTC. So those are places where you can send letters if you all work together and agree on it, but doesn't really engage in the legislature. This has been a little bit different because there's when the governor approves that ODOT can have a position on legislation, that's sort of when OBPAC can also have a position on that, or can also play a role in that. So then can OBPAC act as a convener, messenger, and conveying the concerns of community and advocacy members for any of the above? And then it's preferable to engage with staff who can help with engagement with the OTC and government relations, or the governor's office, I'm sorry. Individuals may serve in this function when engaging legislators, but not when you've got your OBPAC on. So again, as individuals, you guys can advocate for whatever you want, whenever you want. But whenever you're representing OBPAC, you kind of have to follow similar rules that ODOT and ODOT staff have. So does that kind of
yeah, I'll just that's great, and I'd like to add, please, for your own sakes, say explicitly, I am a member of OBPAC, but I'm not doing this as a member of OBPAC. I've been burned on that, living in a small town now, you know, that I wrote something and it, you know, it wasn't, I thought it was clear it was as me, Beth, but if people know that you're in OBPAC, you might as well say it, and or that if they might know that you're in OBPAC, you might as well say it and then say, but I'm doing this on behalf of me only. Save yourself some trouble.
So kind of adds, thank you for that clarity, Emma. on what had been presented in the past from government relations. We can still have them come back in November and sort of give you a primer on this coming legislative session and what they know about the timing of things. If that's something that you all want. So I do want to do a time check. So we're headed into I think a break next.
Yes. That is next. So we're supposed to be back at 2:30. It's 2:23. Let's do it.
Great. Dave, just let me know when you want to resume. I'm going to try to figure out how to share my screen because last time it wasn't working well. So I might do that while you're getting it.
We'll give you 30 seconds.
Thanks. I don't know why it wasn't working before. So let's cross our fingers and hope for the best.
There we go. Okay, I think we're ready to resume. So the next item on the agenda is the ODOT pedestrian and bicycle audit, which is a continuation from our last meeting. And so I'll turn it over to Leanne, who's got her screen sharing working.
Great, thanks, Dave. I'm gonna jump right in because I realized I have 14 slides and 20 minutes and wanted to leave time for discussion. So I have backed us into a corner. So here we go. So ODOT has been doing an internal audit and this we've updated you all a couple of times on this at kind of a high level, and this one's going to have this presentation will have a little bit more details, and we punted it from the last meeting to this meeting. So the internal conclusions from our ped bike audit were that basically we have a limited funding and limited roadway space, so it is hard to build bicycle and pedestrian projects. We also learned that in our audit, but it's probably something we all kind of already knew. We also have improvements. We also need improvements to our data quality, and I think that kind of covers the conclusions of the limitations of why it's hard to build pedestrian and bicycle projects at ODOT. This is the link to the actual audit report plus division responses. I can make sure that I put that in the chat. Roberto, if you have access to this presentation and it's easy for you to get this link and pop it in the chat while I'm talking, that'd be great. If not, I'll do it right after. So the timeline for basically staff's job, which is now to write a work plan for how we can meet some of the audit recommendations, is that in July, we kind of kicked off a meeting of staff to gather around some of the audit recommendations that would help improve those conclusions. In July and August, we met with that staff group. We developed small groups of subject matter experts to kind of break off each recommendation and come up with draft milestones. In September, we presented this meeting. We're going to present to you all on the audit findings and sort of some examples of what our work plan will likely be to help meet some of those audit findings. And then in October, we'll submit our work plan to ODOT's internal auditors to review, and then they will check in with us along the way to make sure that we are meeting those milestones. So in October, we'll create the implementation plan for how we meet those milestones. And then November, we can report back to OBPAC if you all are interested in sort of keeping up to date on this topic on our milestones and our progress and our implementation plan. So one of the questions that we heard from you all when we first started talking about the audit is like, who at ODOT are the people that are going to be working on meeting these challenges that are identified in the audit? So the two things I'm going to share with you all is the ODOT organization chart with some some graphics to show which divisions do some of ODOT's ped bike work. And then I'll show our public transportation division chart showing like which individuals in our division are working on ped bike work. So this is the ODOT organizational chart. The big arrow is pointing to the public transportation division. That's where I work. There are also, so there are about 8 different ODOT divisions that in some way or another will touch the work of addressing the challenges identified in the audit. I'll keep moving kind of quickly because I think we're doing the visuals, but please feel free to slow me down if you want more time to look. The next is sort of a zoom in on the on my division, the public transportation division, and the 2 sections that we're going to highlight the most are the policy and strategic investment unit all the way to the left where I work, and then the multimodal and rail services unit is where the other sort of people who work on pedestrian and bicycle things work. So in my unit on the left, the blue stars represent people that pretty much work full-time on pedestrian and bicycle things. The orange stars represent people who work some of their time on pedestrian and bicycle things. So you can see we've got about 5 or so full-time folks working on ped bike and another 10 or so who touch ped bike work in their jobs. So this is kind of an example of how ped bike work is spread out over all over my division as well as all over the whole agency. It's not like there's one place where all of ODOT's ped bike work happens. And so that collaborating across the agency is actually a big key for a lot of the addressing a lot of the challenges that were identified in the audit findings. So the audit not only identified challenges, but it actually identified 10 recommendations that it wants ODOT to do. And these are the recommendations that ODOT staff are tasked with coming up with milestones to help us get to those recommendations. So these are all the ones that were recommended for my division, the public transportation division. And you'll notice there's like an arrow pointing to the first one, and that one we're going to go into depth a little bit more, and I'm going to show you the sort of the example of the draft milestones that we've got to work on that. And then Alan's going to come and present on the 1%, so you can see how those milestones are already kind of being worked into our work. So so our recommendations are to revise our methodology for how we calculate our report to show that ODOT's spending 1% of our funding on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We're also tasked with updating our strategic action plan goal. We're also tasked with updating the active transportation needs inventory to incorporate context, which the audit kind of defines as that like rural urban context. So we'll know what kind of infrastructure is needed. We also want to, in our key performance measure, ensure that we're using the appropriate language and definitions for bike lane and bikeway. And finally, for our key performance measure, to ensure that the methodology accounts for bikeway facility condition. And then this is the example for the 1% reporting of all of the milestones that ODOT staff are committing to do to get us to the better clarity around the 1% reporting, which again is that ODOT's required to spend 1% of our state funding on bicycle and pedestrian projects as part of the bike bill. So so when Alan goes through his 1%, you'll see his 1% presentation. He's going to be showing you a new methodology that takes these things into account. He's also going to be asking for your feedback about that 1% methodology. We're kind of testing it out over the next couple of months. We're using the new methodology to look backwards at our back data and see how things would pan out. And he'll be asking for your for any input that you have on that so that we can solidify it by December 2024. The other 5 recommendations that the ODOT internal auditors came up with were actually recommended to delivery and operations, but all of these actually need a larger group of people. All of those different divisions that do ped bike work need to be engaged in at least the first 2 of these things, which are the 2 I'm going to highlight as I speak today. So on the far left, we've got a really big one. Ensure agency priority for addressing deficient bicycle and pedestrian facility aligns with funding and prioritization in construction projects. So that's basically saying that the agency needs to prioritize pedestrian and bicycle facilities. The second one is improve the consideration and prioritization of equity in pedestrian and bicycle projects. Both of those 2 things include way more of the agency than just the delivery and operations division. So our division will also be engaged in these. Then the other pieces that were recommended to delivery and operations is to ensure that the roadway context is appropriately considered when determining what's needed for ped bike. Context in this instant means rural and urban context and all of the in-between contexts. The second one is around that data quality control. So develop a written quality control process for asset management data. And the final one is revise our data gathering process to improve accuracy. So these are the 10 recommendations that were provided to us by the audit. The example that I showed you of milestones for the 1% recommendation, where we're coming up with milestones for all of these pieces. So the opportunity for input is, do OBPAC members have any considerations for those audit recommendations that you would like to share with us as we are coming up with those responses? So I think we've got another 10 minutes, and that is pretty much the last slide that I have, besides to go back and review the timeline again. So we have 10 minutes for you to let me know, like, are there any considerations that you'd like staff to be thinking about as we're coming up with the milestones in the work plan for how to implement those 10 recommendations. So I can go back to the recommendations if folks want to look at them and think a little bit more. You also can send me things after you've had a chance to think about it a little bit more. Like we can kind of keep this conversation going. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions about the audit, thoughts about the recommendations? Looks like Beth's hand is raised.
Okay, so you're asking considerations for audit recommendations. Where are you on the work plan? I thought you said it was kind of done. Or
we've got a draft going, and we need to turn it into the auditors by the middle of October. So there's definitely still time to do more work on that piece. And I'm really curious if there are any, like as you look back at these recommendations, does any one of them pop out to you that you're like, oh, I want to make sure that you guys consider this as part of that recommendation?
I'll speak. Remember that all I can remember is the visual of a circle that says that active transportation safety is beyond just roads. But you're not going to be incorporating any of that. I'm forgetting the name. It's not Complete Streets, but this is all about just infrastructure, correct?
All of the recommendations seem to be around infrastructure. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's just the question I had. I'll stop.
I think that if what you're mentioning, Beth, is that actually infrastructure is important. However, the softer side, the non-infrastructure side, is a really good bang for your buck. Like if you're going to build something, if you can educate around it as well, a lot more people are going to use it. I think that would be a great consideration to remind staff to include the softer side in some of our milestones, especially around things like ensuring agency priority for addressing deficient bicycle and pedestrian facilities. I think that your consideration could be like, hey, make sure that you mention the softer side in your milestones, like basically the transportation safety office's whole work plan around pedestrian bicycle education. Is
Wonderful.
that kind of like making that connection?
Yeah, that was part of it. Another bit that's coming to me is reporting on actual injuries, how the police departments report. But is that part, would that be part of this, you know, to improve their what's in their reports, and also any bias they have included in their reports, kind of car oriented bias?
I think you're phrasing your considerations as questions. So what I'm writing down is, hey, staff, make sure you're considering data from the police department and the biases.
Yes, and I'm asking questions because I'm not sure where
You're doing great. So I'm just
Okay.
translating your questions into statements because I can't answer your questions, and I think that they are great things to consider. So I think that your comments are in the right direction.
Okay, so
Thanks so much,
education
Beth.
and reporting data
Mhm.
and bias in the reports, and talking to victims after the fact and that sort of thing.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Dave, I see your hand.
So to be honest, when I look at this slide, I kind of understand how these goals are intended to improve bike ped at ODOT. But when I go to the slide you were on previously, this one, what I see is a lot of in the know technical stuff that I don't understand how doing these things is going to make things better for bike ped at all. And maybe I'm just slow, but revise the 1% methodology. Okay, what's the goal of that? Is it just to show that we're actually spending the 1%? Is it to show we're spending too much and we should spend less? Is it to that's where I'm at. Sorry.
No apology needed, and I will tell you that is not the first time I've heard that. Emma.
I just want to plus one on Dave's comment. I was sitting here thinking, okay, I have a history in transportation professional career, and dropping into this meeting, I was like, did I miss last meeting? Where are we at? And the key question for me is, great, we just got all this stuff presented to us. What changes is it anticipated to result in on the ground? And I'm having trouble following that through line and understanding, given all this, what's the benefit? What are we expecting as a result? Or is this more like needing to update stuff and do administrative work, but it's not super clear what the end objective on the ground is?
I will say from a staff perspective, the ones you're seeing right now seem real specific with similar, like, yeah, I think it could clean things up, but the main recommendations that I think actually can move the needle is kind of this one on the far left. Would be ensure agency priority for addressing deficient bicycle and pedestrian facility aligns with funding and prioritization in construction projects. Like, that's a pretty high level one, but this is the one that I see the most as directly related to the challenges that were identified early on as like, these were the conclusions of the audit. And then we got 10 recommendations, of which I think this number 1 is the biggest one and the most meaty. They get progressively more tiny as you go down the list. And I sort of presented them in the backwards order that they are listed in the audit. So in the audit, this one, and they're not listed in any particular order, but these 5 are listed first, and then the PTD ones are listed second. And like I said, they kind of get progressively more minute and minute, as and like kind of, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it, but I think that everything that y'all are saying feels right on the staff end as well.
Well, and I just want to appreciate your rephrase, Leanne, when you presented this slide for the ensure, you stated it even more directly. And so I think that might be feedback that I'd offer up of, hey, increase the portion of bike ped funding in construction projects. Like there just seems to be a lot of ensure agency priority for addressing. It's like, that's a lot more mental work than fund bike ped, more, higher percentage, done. So the more it can be direct, I think that might be more effective, but I don't know the context well enough to comment effectively.
Yeah, I mean, if there was an example of a project that didn't do what we would have wanted it to do because this first insure item wasn't there, and how is this going to make it better next time would help me understand a lot better what we're trying to do here. But
And Leanne, because Mavis is having issues with her audio, just want to recognize that she put in the chat room, as far as recommendation, anything that will make the bike and ped implementation automatic, so championing is not needed. So she added that in the comment.
Great.
okay, so Leanne, I think you're out of time.
I am. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks. I'm going to stop sharing, and we should be able to pass it on to Alan. And a little bit of preference preamble for Alan's presentation is that a couple of months ago, I think it was brought up that folks were interested in learning more how ODOT does the 1% because local agencies might want to emulate that. So Alan's going to give that is why we've got Alan presenting. Also, it's an example of like how we're utilizing the audit recommendations to try to make our processes better. So pass it off to Alan, but his presentation sort of doing a twofer as an example of the audit and following up from a question we had a couple of months ago from OBPAC members.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone see the presentation that just popped up? And this is on the 1% methodology and moving forward. What we'll cover, why do we report on the 1% requirement? I believe that question was just asked a few moments ago. What is included? What's excluded? Are we meeting the requirement? What is the new draft process? And what are the changes that we made to the old one? So is this better? What's the most recent forecast we have is 2023. We'll show you the result, the audit, and get everything ready for. Did I just lose my connection? Somebody let me know if I just lost my connection.
You're a little iffy, but you're back.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Somehow I just, okay, so what we're looking for are the OBPAC input because we're still in the piloting phase of this new process. We're asking for any feedback or considerations, particularly as it relates to how we can help local communities. So why do we report on it? Well, we have this revised statute 366.514 that says no less than 1% of state highway funds expended by ODOT and cities and counties be used for on-street pedestrian or bicycle infrastructure. And it requires that biking and walking facilities be put in whenever we do a new roadway or substantially rebuild an existing one. So we review our expenditures and to help ensure that our commitment to the 1% is being met. So what is included? We look at the administrative costs. So the cost to administer the program, when we support the OBPAC, the meeting cost and everything else, all that is part of that 1%. Components of larger transportation projects. So we get these projects that can be massive, several $1 million, and they may be 100% active transportation, or they may be a smaller portion. So we look at the ones that are smaller portions and try to pull out what is active transportation from this much larger component. It might be an entire roadway rebuild where they're going to put in a bike lane for the first time and a new sidewalk. So those where we start pulling those components. And then what do we have dedicated funding? So what projects are absolutely dedicated 100% to bike ped? Are we doing things that are enhancing bike ped deliberately through the program? So what it does not include, our report does not look at what's allocated to cities and counties. We don't look at non-highway funds. I'm the community pass program manager, and I don't use any state highway funds. So my program is pulled out of this to make sure that we don't actually overcount any federal funds that are being done, because we're only looking at state funds and funding that we can't quantify. And part of the problem we have with larger projects is they may be from design to construction, and we don't know how much of the design is actually going to be active transportation. So we don't consider design. So already we're starting to undercount a little bit. So are we meeting the requirement? Historically, we've met it or exceeded it. Since 1985, we've averaged 1.35%. And 2005 was the last year we did not meet the 1% minimum, and it was 0.98, if I remember, just under. So what is the draft process? So what we do is we take the revenues that comes into the Department of Transportation. We take out debts to bonds that get paid off. We take out all the money that gets transferred to cities and counties. And then that came out in 2023 to $857 million once all these things were removed. And then so 1% of that 857 million is 8.57 million. So that became the 1% target. So that is how we set the target. Then we look at the administrative costs that I mentioned before, contracts with pedestrian and or bicycle components. So these are the much larger projects. Dedicated ped bike programs that might be federal, they might be state only. We separated out state funding from other funding. So for when we have these contracts, what we end up looking at is how much of that contract is federal, how much of it is state, how much of it is local. And then we're able to break down those percentages for each and apply it. So we may end up where ODOT is not putting in any money because the entire match is going local. And then we compare all that state funding to the 1% target. And I know what you're asking here is that, what does that mean for local? It means that we can track what the locals are spending from state highway funds on these contracts that are federal or larger that are put into our STIP, and we can track that, but we can't track what they're spending locally through their maintenance fund or anything else that would not show up in that database. So what are the changes? New databases. A 1% automated contract database. We used to have to request this data, and someone would have to cull the data from several different places, and now it's all in one place where I can pull it up in about 15 minutes. It's a huge time saver, and it's great. And it took us almost 2 years to work the bugs out. The other one is new, is Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. We didn't have that until about 2016, so they used a different database, and then that database was no longer being used. And so we ended up, when we started revising this, trying to redo it how it had been done before, and finding out that these databases didn't exist anymore. So we had to recreate them. And then the other one is the revenues apportionment, which is on ODOT's website, that tells us how much money ODOT is getting. The other one was standardization of criteria. There were a lot of variables that we had to look at. So one of the things we do is the criteria that we look at are based upon keywords in the contract database. We look at a sidewalk would be 100%. For example, a concrete driveway would be 50% because it's going to be used for both cars, and then you're going to have that sidewalk portion of it that crosses it. One of the harder, more difficult ones was looking at a traffic signal and how much of a new traffic signal would be active transportation, because the previous methodology said you had to get into the contract drawings and then you had to look at that intersection, the number of legs and the design of it to figure out, and then that could be 10, 15, or 20. And if we had several contracts that were nothing but replace traffic signals along a 10-mile segment, and that it was just unworkable. So we worked with the bicycle standards guy and found out that a standard 10% on average would work well, and we did that and saved a huge amount of time. And then the last thing we did is removed unneeded tracking. We were doing a lot of tracking of different things that we didn't need to. We were looking at various active transportation programs such as modernization, preservation, safety, and then how much was of all of these funds were actually being used by a certain specific fund, which S080, which is the funds that are dedicated to active transportation. And that just created a lot of confusion when you build out the results, and then you have to start taking different portions out. And no one was asking for that data anymore, so there's no reason to pull out that data. So this is what we end up with. It's much simpler. Is we have the cost of administration that includes supporting OBPAC. It also includes a portion of David's salaries and Leanne's salaries. Construction projects that include active transportation, I mentioned that because we look at the contracts. The standalone active transportation roadway projects, and that does include the curb ramps, the settlement we have for ADA, and that ODOT is putting in a huge number of curb ramps throughout the state. And that is a big chunk of these standalone projects. And of course, the annual allocation for safe routes to school, which is considered part of this. So we ended up in 2023 having a total of almost 21 million being spent on active transportation in the state using state highway funds. Subtracting the 1% target, 8.57 million, and we ended up with an amount over of about 12 million, or about 2.45% of the highway fund in 2023 was spent on active transportation. So the next step that we're doing is we're going to compare the new process with the old process 2021, and how does it work when we put in all the new data for 2021? How much different will the results be? And then we'll have the final approval of the methodology to finalize the 2022 1% report, begin 2024, and solidify by the end of the year. And we'll start it all over again for 2025 come July of next year. And with that, I will stop and just open up to any questions you may have.
Can I just comment?
Comment, questions, yes.
It's wonderful what you're doing. I appreciate it all. And I'm guessing that it was such a high number, that 2.4 something, because of all the work that ODOT is doing now, all the behind the scenes work, all the stuff that was just in your slide. Is that true?
Correct. So we're doing an awful lot of stuff. Let me go back to that one slide again. And
yeah, that said how much was administered.
Yeah. So we'll go back to. So when we look at this, what we see is if we were to, Safe Route School alone is almost 1.1 or 1.2 of the 1%. And then the big chunk of the standalone projects, which the majority of which are curb ramps, are a huge number. They're going to be huge for the next 3 or 4 years. If we were not counting the curb ramps, we'd still be meeting the target at around 1.08%. It would just be much smaller. But this does vary year to year to year. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess it's silly for me to think that it would that your revamping of everything is would have any impact on these big numbers. But I think it's great. I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
That's the reason why we're going backwards as well. To Alan's doing a basically a recalculation of the 1% for, is it 2021 and 2022, Alan? And then we're going to compare it to the original amount just to see if it's really these improvements were to try to make it simpler so that it didn't take so many hours to do it. And so we don't expect the numbers to be very different from the past.
And that is absolutely correct. Yes, we're going to the past, check it out, reviewing it, and making sure. And the other one also is looking at the old ones from the original methodology. As I'd mentioned before, that by having all these different ways of culling data for different programs such as preservation, modernization, safety, etc., it really opened up a lot more ways for mistakes to be made. And so we need to make sure that as we go back, we correct those, but also by removing those, we're removing the chances of mistakes being made by simplifying the process.
Yeah, we're actually kind of removing the chance of overcounting. So if anything, our numbers might be slightly smaller, but we're imagining they're going to be about the same. But that's why we're doing the double check of the past numbers.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you go back, I think it was like your second slide where it shows like whatever the ORS 662 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So is this only applicable to like roads managed by ODOT directly? Because I see that like it says it requires facilities for walking and biking wherever a road is, but I mean, I see roads all of the time that are just straight road, no shoulder or anything, or like even an opportunity for walking or biking. So is it just for like ODOT roads, or?
These are for all roads that are funded with state highway funds.
Okay.
But we're only responsible for reporting out for the ODOT's portion of the state highway funds. So the state highway funds come from the gas tax, and then they're divided up 50% to ODOT, 30% to counties, and 20%, sorry, to cities. And so we're reporting out on ODOT's 50%. Cities and counties are also required to spend 1% are also required to follow this rule. And I think that was one of the reasons why OBPAC wanted to learn more about it and talk more about it, because I don't know if local entities report out on it regularly in the way that ODOT has started to do. And I think we've only done it since like 2017. Like I don't think we reported out on it so regular.
I think also related to your question is that the second bullet says whenever requires it to be facilities to be built whenever a road, street, or highway is built or rebuilt. That is a different criteria than maintenance. So that's why you're still seeing a lot of roadways that don't have the improvements in, because it's not required until they fully start tearing everything down and rebuild it. If it's an existing roadway.
Yeah, I mean, is this a new statute, or is it, because I thought it was pretty old?
It is old. I think it's from the original bike bill. I know that we've been tracking this to the best of my knowledge, since at least 1986, because that's as far back as my records go.
71 is when this was enacted, when this bill was enacted. So I don't know if this piece was added in later, but the bill itself is from 1971.
Okay. I don't know. I guess I was wondering why there was still roads hanging around without stuff, if that was like one of the things in the statute, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And Nolan, I can tell you that I'm aware of more than one lawsuit that was filed because a city or county was rebuilding a road and were not planning to include sidewalks or bike facilities, and got sued by activists because they weren't following this rule. But we have a lot of roads in Oregon that haven't been touched.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has to, it's triggered, the bike bill's triggered if you're building a new road or if you're doing I'm gonna get the words wrong, but it's like a substantial rebuild. And I think that there's better definitions for that I can't describe more right now, but I can find out if folks have questions.
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering is like, are people getting around this by saying, I'm not rebuilding the road, I'm just like refinishing it, even though they're completely redoing the road or something? I don't know.
There's specific things between rehabilitation and which would be considered rebuilding and maintenance. And the maintenance would be like you have a slurry seal you may have where they're stripping off the asphalt and replacing the asphalt. That would still be considered maintenance. But when you start tearing up the underlying concrete, or if you're widening the road, that is where it gets triggered.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
And before we move on, Beth does have her hand up.
Yes. Well, first of all, Emma, in the chat, was your question answered? It looks like, right?
It was not answered with a full response. What I am wondering is for the construction projects that include active transportation, 2.3 million roughly for 2023, like what magnitude are we talking here? Because Beth, you were saying, wow, that's a lot of money. And here I am thinking, if a crossing with a pedestrian hybrid beacons costing maybe $500,000, that's 5 crossings across the state of Oregon. That sounds pretty small all of a sudden. So that's why I'm trying to get a sense of scale. Thanks, Beth.
A sense of scale. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that 2.3 million does not buy a whole lot on ODOT right of way, based on just my knowledge of building safe routes to school projects on ODOT right of way. Like sometimes like a section of sidewalk can cost $2 million because you're needing to put in the stormwater drainage.
Just remember that when we have a construction project that includes active transportation, that is not necessarily a state only funded project. This could be federal, and the state is anywhere from 10.27% to a little bit less. So you can anticipate that this being, only about 10% of how much was actually being spent on the projects.
I still have a
So if
question, comment. Does that sound good, Emma?
Yeah, that's a helpful reminder. Thanks.
Yeah. And there
so-
is also a local thing as well, and the local share of these is we can track as well for the construction projects that include active transportation as well as the federal. We just can't go beyond that one program of construction projects that include, because we don't have access to any of the other databases.
That's what I was going to ask about, that other 50%. Is this methodology transferable to a county or city that wants to change their methodology?
I think it might depend on what data they have and what data they're currently collecting.
Correct.
So there's no standard. Is there a standard way, Alan, that they are doing it? Or there's no standard?
We
There's
don't
no
track
standard.
how cities and
Yeah.
counties track it.
Yeah,
We
we track.
don't track how they track. Yeah.
Right.
You don't
So
track
we're able to
how
track
they
ours.
track. So
Right. So
yeah,
they may
I
have a
just thought
local
you
bond
might
program.
know. Go ahead.
Oh, they may have a local bond program. They may have their maintenance program that automatically takes care of it. We just don't know, and that will be different from city to city each, because they do things different individually.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
And I cannot see the screen, so I don't know who has their hand raised or what all questions are in the chat.
It looks like Emma's hand is up.
Sorry, I'm speaking up so much. If committee members who aren't speaking as much want to say things, please jump in the queue ahead of me. I've been speaking way more than I intended to. But Beth just raised a really good point, and I wanted to say I have heard from local jurisdiction staff that there's just a lack of information. And I think from an OBPAC role, this is an opportunity to say, hey, what enforcement mechanism does the state have to make sure that local jurisdictions, A, know this is a requirement, and B, fulfill the requirement? I could envision, transportation planners coming from out of state to Oregon, and no one told them this exists. How is it supposed to be implemented in a local jurisdiction? So that's one point. And then to Alan's comment about local bond measures or, other maintenance funding, I just wanted to clarify, because my understanding is this is state highway funds. So how would like a local bond measure relate to the 1% requirement? Or maybe there's just clarification there.
Oh,
I don't
that is
think it
clear. Yeah,
would.
it doesn't.
Okay, so it's just state received funds by the local jurisdiction.
Correct.
Okay, I think there's some opportunity here, and I wanted to kind of reinforce what Beth was raising and say, yes, that's important. We shouldn't just pass this by.
Yeah, but what can we do as OBPAC?
Well, I think probably the big question is whether the state funds that go to cities and counties pass through ODOT in any fashion. Because if they don't, then I don't think ODOT has any way to even create a rule that would require them to report on it. It would pretty much be up to the legislature and the courts to enforce the law at that level. But maybe ODOT hands the money, the 30% out. I don't know how that works. Alan, maybe you do.
So this isn't in our jurisdiction because we advise ODOT and nobody else. So is this kind of like I need to talk to my legislator and say, how do cities account for it, and do they have to report to anybody? Is that what I'm hearing? That we have
the role that ODOT has over this is a non role. So like when we have a grant program, we can write stipulations into a grant contract to say like you need to provide this amount of reporting on these funds. Ian might have some better information about this than I do. I think that there is wiggle room in the education side. There's definitely wiggle room there, but in the enforcement side, there's there's ODOT doesn't do enforcement for locals on local right of way.
And
so
therefore we have we can't.
Yeah,
Right,
there's
so
there's no mechanism for us to do that.
Got it.
It's out of our jurisdiction.
So
Ian's hand is up and might be able to provide some more context here.
Okay, so
Are we over time?
I'll allow that, but we are over time. So
Thanks, Chair Thompson. I just wanted to note in the chat, I put it in the section of the bike bill. The section that I quoted, it doesn't encourage, it allows cities and counties to ask ODOT for technical assistance in these matters. And so if cities or counties proactively want assistance, they can reach out. But as Alan and Leanne have mentioned, there's no enforcement mechanism.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. So before we move on, I do want to make sure that everybody that on all the OBPAC members that want to ask questions are getting a chance to do so. I know I tend to talk too much. And not to put you on the spot, Carrie, but you've been kind of quiet. So is there anything that you'd like to ask or add to this conversation? Just want to make sure you're welcome to jump in at any point here. If you're talking, you're on mute.
Or Mavis. I know sometimes being on the phone can be a disadvantage in meetings as well.
Yes. Mavis usually doesn't have a problem speaking up, but she may be having a trouble unmuting. Okay, well, that'll probably not be the last time I bring that up. So let's move on. And thank you very much, Alan. It sounds like a big project. I'm more interested in changing 1% to 2% than I am in seeing if we came within 0.01% of meeting it, but no, it's important to be able to track. You can't change what you're not tracking, so that's very important. Okay, we're into the OBPAC members' informal discussion, so this is a chance for us to bring up things that weren't on the agenda, or maybe questions that you've had since we went past the topic. Looking for hands, or just jump in. Beth.
Sorry, I'm sending this to everybody. Send. This is the link to the word I was looking for was the safe system approach, and the link will show you. I'm looking at that little chart. It's all about safer roads is 1/6 of it, and safer speeds, post crash care, safer people, and safer vehicles. If you recall, it's looking at society as a whole as getting together. So Leanne, when we were talking about the work program, that's what I was referring to, and to kind of think about that, I guess, is all I'm suggesting. The other thing I wanted to mention, going back to the work program, is do you have or are you going to have any sort of support for local jurisdictions, like as in model code, that they can just plug into their municipal codes or county or whatnot? Anything like that happening with the work program, or is that beyond the scope of?
I don't know if I understand the question.
That sometimes you can the planning, the transportation planners can create model code, which is just code that can be plunked into any city's municipal code, and then it changes the rules, and basically for the city, that certain things that you're going to incorporate into your work program will also won't be only for ODOT, but it'll be for all the municipalities and other jurisdictions that are.
Are you thinking? I'm having a hard time following the context. What would we be changing code for?
Well, you were asking about input on the work program. And I'm just wondering if that would be one of the items that you would include in your work program, creating model code.
So that cities could like also follow the audit recommendations?
Yeah, incorporate that into their transportation system plans. That's basically how it's done. So that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you.
Other thoughts? Okay.
Are we on informal discussion, or are we to roundtable updates?
We're currently on informal discussion. I was about to move us along unless I saw or heard some more discussion. And it's pretty quiet.
I think that the intention behind this time, when we were creating the agenda, was noting that we do have a lot of new members, and that we wanted to make a little bit of space for people to, like, if you've got a question in the back of your head, you're just like, I don't really want to ask it, that's a dumb question. It's like, not dumb question. We're all here to learn together. And so Dave wanted to provide a little bit of space to just like welcome any of those questions that you've gotten, that you've had in the back of your head this meeting. And so just wanted to provide a little more context for the goal of this time, if that helps loosen folks up a little bit. So if you've been wondering anything, we would love to be able to make space to talk about it.
I know I'm not new,
Go ahead, Nolan.
but oh,
Yeah,
you
go.
okay. Roberto sent it's called Consent 04 internal audit report packet along at 2:34. And I was wondering, is that the entire audit for ODOT that has been happening? And is it like finished? Or is that like an ongoing thing?
Great question. So that is the audit report that when I sort of summarized the conclusions, but that's the whole audit report. And then at the end of it, there is a letter that ODOT division administrators wrote as like an audit response. And then that whole thing was submitted to the Oregon Transportation Commission on a consent agenda a couple of months ago. So that's why it's called consent. That's why the weird title. But if you click on it, it's the full audit report plus the division administrator's response. And then after that happens, they actually kick it to staff to say like, hey, staff, here's the audit report. Here are the recommendations. Here's our response. Create a work plan for how to address these recommendations. And so that's the step that we're on right now is creating that work plan to help address those recommendations.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That put all the pieces together for me. So thank you.
No, that was a great question, Nolan, and appreciate trying to provide the context for where it goes. My brain's the exact same way. If I can't figure out where in my brain to put something, it's out. It's immediately out. So anytime you need to know like where in my brain does this supposed to go, like what file does it go in, please feel free to ask questions because that's how we all understand better and then be able to work better together. So great
Thank you
question.
for explaining.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So my new member question is, do we have access to this chat somehow after the meeting? Because there's a lot of good information in here, and I don't remember seeing it when I was looking through the.
Roberto, can you answer that one? And is there a way to include it in the notes, or have we included it in the notes?
Yeah, I typically include most of the links that are provided from public comment into the minutes, and material also will be posted online, basically summarizing the discussions that's been had in the chat room.
Okay.
So I am happy to, yes, include all of these materials in the minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, it gets saved on the Zoom account. So like, so it doesn't disappear, and we can also help provide that in different ways if you're finding that including it in the notes isn't working. But now that we know that they're in the notes, maybe we'll look for them there. Thanks, Roberto.
Yeah, other questions?
I got another question. Long time ago, very start of the meeting, I don't know her name, but the person from the street trust with the big
Sarah
glass.
Iannarone. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. She was saying that we had someone that was going to represent us, or she was recommending that we do. And I was wondering who that person was, or if we had done that, because I hadn't really heard about that before.
That was I'll respond to this. I think she was saying that I am OBPAC's representative on the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee. So I serve on OBPAC as a non-voting member. I also go to the committee meetings that she is chair of. And so she's acknowledging that existing role.
Okay. That makes sense. Then in that case, what can we do as OBPAC to assist you with your pursuit of bridge infrastructure and whatnot?
I think the bridge infrastructure comment was related to 2025 legislative session, whereas the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee that Sarah chairs is specific to facilities that are transferring from ODOT to local jurisdictions. So kind of two different topics that you're asking about right now. Do you want to ask a follow-on question now that I've separated those two out?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering how I wasn't sure. I feel like we're in a little bit of a planning phase, and I like doing stuff. So I was wondering if there's anything I can do to help you, or if there's like someone to talk to, move something along in your world.
Yeah. I feel good on the jurisdictional transfer advisory committee because we've gone through the first round of the process, created the pre-application, created the application. 2 cities have come forward and applied. We've forwarded the recommendation to the Joint Transportation Committee. So that's now funneling its way towards the legislative session. I think where there's more doing potential that we could talk about more as a committee is how are we as a committee engaging leading up to the 2025 legislative session. And that's where the subtopic around like maybe bridges for bike ped could be one thing we touch on.
Wonderful. Let's do that.
Yeah, so maybe that's an additional meeting. I don't know if there's currently a subcommittee focused on funding. I know I had been focusing on that some with Andre, but given family stuff that came up, I haven't dedicated the time that I had hoped to on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was wondering if anyone needs ideas for what to do next meeting. Now there's something.
Beth.
Speaking of that, Emma, now I know that Mavis is our representative to safe routes to schools. Is this what you've decided? Is this along the same lines as what Mavis does? Or is this just something you wanted to be on?
I was appointed by
representing
OBPAC to
BikePed?
serve in this capacity, similar to how Mavis is on Safe Routes to School and Dell is on the Oregon Recreational Trails Advisory Committee. There's a number of OBPAC members that have roles on other committees to help cross-populate and spread
So
our.
what are all of them? Just refresh my memory.
It's in our work plan or was previously. I don't have that at the tip of my fingers.
Okay.
There's the safe routes, there's jurisdictional transfer, there's a parks grant committee. I can't remember the name of it right now. That we don't have anyone sitting on at the moment. There is there's an ADA committee that that ODOT runs that we also currently don't have anyone sitting in on right now. I asked folks recently if anyone was interested. Kathy did mention that she would be interested if nobody else said they were interested. So right now, Kathy is who I'll follow up with on that one. And then we actually just got in our inboxes and we're getting more information. There's a request for an OBPAC representative on the bicycle. Oh, the bike committee. It's run by Cycle Oregon, but it's funded by the Parks and Rec.
Bikeways?
Scenic Bikeways. That's it. Nailed it. So OBPAC gets requested a lot actually to serve on committees. And so we kind of say yes when there's someone who is available, and when it's not, we just say we can't fill that seat right now. And in general, they come back around every once in a while and ask again, and then we ask again and we see if anybody is interested. So those are the ones that I know of. And oftentimes
is the MAC coming up?
That's not an OBPAC position. That's just a bicycle and pedestrian position, but it's not an OBPAC appointed position. A lot of committees will have it written in their rules or charter that they have a position that is for an OBPAC member. However, like we don't have to fill it. Like if it's empty, they just have to have asked us if there's someone that can fill it. So that's sort of that's my big picture overview of ODOT members, OBPAC members being on other committees as representatives. Emma, did I leave anything out? I know that Emma or Mavis, I know that you guys have been around a little bit longer than me, so I'm still collecting since we don't have access to every rule everywhere that says that they want an OBPAC member on it. We just sort of get it as it happens, and so I think I covered all the ones that I know of. Yeah, exactly. I think we're nailing it.
I need to look back at the documentation, but I think you did a good job.
It's the parks one that has to do with the grants that I don't remember the name of right now. Mavis was on it for a little while, and but that one's also run by parks. They love to put OBPAC as a member on their committees. They love it because you guys are so great.
So let's move on to member roundtable, so we don't run out of
I'm
time.
not sure we've quite responded to Nolan wanting to take action. And
Oh,
maybe
I wasn't saying like I'm fine, just I was saying I was wondering if there's anything. I know you talked about like, we talk about there's something to do, and then we talk about it, and then boom, it's the end of like whatever's happening.
I love that you're bringing this up. I want to support you to move on it. I personally don't have a ton of capacity in the next couple of months, but one idea that could be action to make our November meeting more effective could be for Nolan and maybe another OBPAC member to meet with either ODOT's legislative staff and or the governor's office to hear from them what they're considering for transportation for the 2025 legislative session, and then bring forward to our November meeting like a response to that, either things that we want to support as a committee via the channels that we're allowed to, and or things that are maybe missing that we think are important for forwarding and enhancing walking and biking in Oregon. So I tossed that as an idea for action. I personally can't participate in the next couple months, but I see how it could forward our work as a committee.
If either Leanne or Ian know anyone from the government's office to talk to or anything like that, I guess.
We can help facilitate setting up meetings. I will say that OBPAC used to have a series of subcommittees. Over the last year and a half, we really haven't had subcommittees, so there hasn't been a whole lot of work besides recruitment and writing letters that happens between meetings. And I would say that's because we don't have a lot of capacity outside of meetings based on the current membership. So that's so I don't want anyone to feel bad that we haven't done that. I also wanted to acknowledge that Emma's like inviting people to engage more in between meetings. And Ian and I are here to help. If you want to meet, if you have a ODOT staffer that you'd like us to help set up a meeting with, that's what we're here. That's what we're here to do. So so we can help facilitate that. I might recommend the chairs or the co-chairs. There's some weight in that. OBPAC member also holds weight, but OBPAC co-chairs hold some weight whenever we're asked to organize that kind of meeting in between meetings. And the rules around public meeting laws are just that any decision that you all make at a committee can't be made by a small group of people outside of this public meeting. So you can't make any decisions, but you can talk with ODOT staff about programs and ask questions.
Okay, maybe I'll see who I want to talk to, and I'll email. I'll email Ian and figure it out.
That's great. And Nolan, if you would copy myself and Andre.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not going to promise. I would like to be involved in that. I'm in the process of moving. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll put everything in it. Okay.
And I'm thinking, Emma, you have in mind what you would like the discussion to be, maybe, or if you could share that with them.
The prompt I would suggest is doing a listening session to receive information to understand what is the landscape as currently set to move forward, so that we can then decide whether to comment on either supporting and or amending at our November meeting. Does that make sense to you, Nolan and Dave? Like, where are things headed? Do we want to change it or support it?
No, that's exactly what I was trying to get at way back earlier, is that if we know what the sense is, albeit not even necessarily presented to the legislature yet, then we can try and influence ODOT's work there. So, okay. Good. If anybody else is interested in that topic, I would please reach out to Nolan or me, and I'll put you guys in touch. So, okay, let's do roundtable. Let's see, we've got about 12 minutes. So, Beth, I'm going to call on you first because you are next to me on the.
I have spoken way too much today. Let's hear from Mavis and Carrie. And I guess I haven't been looking. Has Kathy come in at all? She was going to try.
I haven't seen Kathy, and the prompt here is that members share updates from their communities. So what are you seeing in your community? And are you where are you involved in any ped bike stuff in your community? Are you learning anything from that?
Okay, I can say one thing. There's been a committee. There's been a recommendation to our city council to have fewer in order to have fewer committees, advisory committees, to completely disband the bike ped advisory committee. So that's what my poor bike ped people are dealing with, and trying to figure out if staff can do what they do. So we're in the throes of that.
Thanks, Beth, for sharing that. I
Hi.
see Carrie's there. Please. What's going on?
Multnomah County did a walk audit in the Centennial neighborhood that was led by students from David Douglas High School and then another middle school that's nearby. So they're formulating the results from that, and it was really great. They had about 30 of the youth out there doing the walk safety audit, and we have more to come. We'll be engaging on the east side of Portland quite a bit in the next year, as we're doing bike and walk safety classes with some of what we call our community health hubs. And those are especially at our African immigrant refugee CBOs, doing bike and walk safety with those populations so that they can bike and walk more safely as families. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing right now.
Davey, you're muted.
Thank you. Carrie, I think it's awesome. The students were the ones that were leading that. And I was just curious, were their parents involved as well, especially at the middle school level? Or
a couple parents. We just got permission through the schools to have them come out and do that activity.
Yeah, I think decision makers tend to respond really well to kids.
Very much so. I always say, yeah, if you can get the child to speak out, they will be heard, volumes louder than we do. And they're so blunt and honest. And so there's, not a lot of padding that goes along with what they tell you. And that's what we appreciate. But there's the enthusiasm that a lot of our youth have for activism is quite energizing.
Yes, that is awesome. Thank you.
I love it. Can you bottle some of it up and bring it back here for us too? Like, I just thank you for sharing, Kara. That's lovely to hear.
You're welcome.
So somebody else want to jump in, or should I call on people? Emma.
How about me, Dave, since they unmuted me?
Oh, yes. Please go ahead, Mavis.
Great. Then I can go back to being unmuted. So, good job, Dave. It's so nice to see somebody else leading the meeting. Out here in LeGrand, we had Cycle Oregon come through. It was really cool to watch all the cyclists, and we had some youth organizations that were interacting with them. That was pretty cool. A negative was there was a lot of anti-bike sentiment, and it's just one of the things I don't know how to address, because out here we have lots of farm equipment and all sorts of things that we navigate with our transportation system. But the minute somebody is in Lycra and on a bike, they become the enemy. So I don't know how we can address that, but I definitely am frustrated by that. And then when we're talking about, trying to get walking and biking going, if there's any way we can get it so that there doesn't have to be a champion in every single little town for walking and biking, for that to happen with the Safe Routes to School and some of those other programs. That's where I see things, the needle moving. Whereas right now it's just, well, we'll help you report if you want us to, or we'll help you if you ask us, but we're not going to like push the issue. So I don't know how to kind of to move that needle. And I've talked enough, and Emma, it's so great to hear your voice, and bye.
Thanks, Mavis.
Great to
So
hear your voice,
that-
Mavis.
I'm sorry.
Ready? I said it was great to hear Mavis's voice.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So back to you, Emma. You were...
Okay, great. I have 3 short things. First, I am up for renewal for my driver's license. And when I contacted the DMV, because the real ID is now a thing, I was like, that would be nice to get it lumped in. I tried to schedule an appointment at the DMV. I first tried several places up in Portland since I've been up there a fair amount lately. Then I contacted the Springfield office. I looked online. There are no available appointments that you can pre-schedule at the DMV. And so I think this carries through to bike and ped safety issues, in that if there's such a barrier to people setting up and doing the right thing to get their driver's licenses in this state, then I have to believe there's follow-on safety implications if people can't access the services to take the driver's safety test and might just be out there driving because they need to get around. And so I don't know if we have the DMV director coming back to us as a committee soon, but it was just an alarming moment that I personally experienced and said, you know, here I am, someone who happens to have more flexibility in my schedule right now, but for someone who is trying to squeeze this in, good luck. It requires going to the DMV, taking a ticket in person that morning, hoping that you get served that day. If not, coming back a different day. Like, that's just a big burden on folks to do the right thing, to get their driver's license, to pass the test, to like use the system as intended. So it's probably understaffed. I don't know what we can do, but that was a red flag for me. On happier notes, the Eugene Springfield Free Bikes for Kids organization is doing the donation day on October 13th. So collecting donated bikes from the community to then refurbish and give out with giveaway day to the kids most in need in the community who otherwise may not have access to a bicycle. I'll drop a link in the chat for that. And then if you're in the Eugene area, it is my birthday on Saturday, September 28th, and it happens to be the Eugene Bright Parade. It's a parade where you light up with lots of fun lights, and there's biking and happy people, and it's just such a great positive celebration of human-powered kind of art in motion. So I'll drop the link in the chat about that too. If I'm in town, I plan to go. If no one's there, that'd be cool to meet you in person and ride bikes together. Just some fun stuff that's happening locally.
Oh, thanks, Emma. Let's see, Del, did you want to add anything? What's going on?
What's going on? Well, you know, we had in Beaverton a couple of weeks ago, we had a policymaker ride, and that was sort of fun. A couple of people here were there. Jessica was there. John Moss was there. Anyway, they rode around, showed off some new infrastructure in Washington County, and also pointed out some problem areas where infrastructure is sorely needed and totally unfunded. So that's a common problem every place, is just the funding. There's all sorts of jurisdictions now that have grand plans and stuff they would like to do, but no money to do anything. And one of my top priorities for the last couple of decades has probably been bike ped bridges. You know, Emma mentioned bridges, and I think bridges are important too. And again, they seem to be on the bottom end of funding, and every year the costs go up and up and up. And lastly, one thing that people don't talk about when they're talking about infrastructure and safety and stuff is just enforcement. It just seems like if we could have some more enforcement of speed limits, just general traffic rules, that a lot of the problems we have will go away, and not go away, but at least be it'd be help. And we work to get better infrastructure, like the bike paths. Springwater Corridor is a good example here in Portland area. And then it gets overrun by vandals and campers, and just to be, I mean, we just need to have some better maintenance. We spend all this money on planning and we don't spend any money on maintenance. And so all this stuff that we spent millions of dollars on sort of goes to seed and gets wasted. I don't know what we can do about that, but that's one of my pet peeves.
Thanks, Doug. We got some background noise, so can you mute if you're not talking, please? Wow, I see everybody's muted and I still hear background noise. So anyway, Nolan, you're up. You got -1 minute, so go for it.
I don't think I have that much. So the only thing I got is I went to a bike shop recently trying to get a bike. And honestly, as a person who's really into biking, it was an unbelievably unenjoyable experience. And actually, it was multiple bike shops, and so I bring it up, is I was just a little bit concerned about, I don't know if this is just a Portland area thing, but it seemed like all the people at the bike shops were very like, if you weren't like a biker and like someone wearing like a bike suit and like trying to go Mach 8 down like a main street, they like weren't there to help you. And it was, I just wanted to, fix up my bike, and they weren't very helpful about it at multiple bike shops. And I was like, oh, this is like a pretty normal maintenance thing. And I always try to be nice about it. But so anyway, there's nothing ODOT can do, but just another thing for thought is a barrier of entry to bicycling is crappy bike shop owners, which Mavis, you were not one of them. Absolutely lovely. I'm sure you're amazing. That's it. I don't really have anything else.
Thanks, Nolan. Okay, on to the agenda build for our November meeting. And Leanne, I guess I'm looking to you again for some help here. And
You got it. So in our November meeting, actually, we just rescheduled it for December 4th or 5th. I can't remember which one, but it's the Wednesday, that first Wednesday in December. And so we're looking for December meeting topics, just to make sure that we can build that out. And again, we're looking forward to 2025, so we don't necessarily do this month by month. This is sort of a thing that's happened over time due to Leanne not knowing the cadence of OBPAC, and just now getting my feet under me right when Ian comes into the picture. So we'll work together for the 2025. Anyway, so this is a holdover from, let's make sure that our November meeting has the things in it that you all want to talk about our December meeting. So right now, based on some past conversations and what we think should go in December, is the report out on the state sidewalk improvement program funds. That is sort of feeds into the 1% of funding that ODOT tracks for the legislation. A portion of that we spend on the sidewalk improvement program. So we're going to report out on that, funds spent and funds planned. And then we were also going to potentially report out from the Transportation Safety Office, which is the office that houses a lot of our education programming and materials. They had a conference last week where they heard a lot from grantees and from the public of feedback about sort of ODOT's materials, as well as sort of showcasing some of ODOT's materials. And so Heidi Manlove said she could come and give a report out from what they learned at that conference. So those are the two things that we currently have on the list. I'm curious if those are still rising to the top, or if you have any other ideas of things that you want to talk about. From what I've heard from this meeting, it seems like a preemptive talk with the legislative team before legislative session is something else that folks would be interested in. What else? Or were you, does SWIP and Transportation Safety Office still seem like the right ones, and add legislature? And then we can't really fit much more than 3 presentations and discussions without getting into the, we don't have time for discussion.
That
Emma.
seems pretty full, and I want to make sure to loop back. I know Ian's about to meet with all of us, and we touched on the work plan today. Maybe just a brief report out of kind of how that's starting to shape up.
I'd be happy to share maybe after my conversation with all of you, to share kind of what through lines or common threads there are. That could maybe be the start of a conversation of a work plan, if that's all right. Great.
Yeah, and we can include the brainstorm that we had today, plus the gathering that Ian and I will do over, like, what month do we need to, what decisions do we need to make in 2025, and how to prepare for those. So in our December meeting, we could do a preview of like a rough draft 2025, like meeting calendar about what we're going to discuss when, and how to make sure that you all are prepared for those discussions. I think that's a pretty full agenda for December. Does that feel right? Great.
Sounds good. Okay. We are at the end. Any last comments? I will say, first of all, to everyone, thank you for putting up with my first attempt at this.
You did great.
I was gonna say thank you, Dave, for chairing us amazingly.
Thanks for all the help from everybody who tried to keep me on track as I wandered off. Oh,
you did great.
Yeah.
Okay. It was wonderful seeing everybody, hearing lots of great stuff, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.